Imagine a world where the only way to get from Europe to China was to ride a horse for months, facing bandits, harsh weather, and vast deserts. Sounds crazy, right? But that was the reality for travelers in the 13th and 14th centuries. This was the age of the Silk Road, a network of trade routes that connected the East and the West. One of the most famous travelers of this era was Marco Polo, a Venetian merchant who traveled to China and wrote about his adventures. His journey, and the book that followed, changed the way Europeans saw the world. Marco Polo's story begins with a bit of luck. If he and his travel companion, Rustichello, had not fought in the wars against Genoa, we might never have known about his travels. Rustichello was a writer who found Marco's stories fascinating and decided to write them down. Together, they created a book that has captivated readers for over 700 years. The book, The Travels of Marco Polo, is filled with incredible tales of exotic lands, strange customs, and rich cultures. But it's not just a collection of stories. It's a window into a world that was largely unknown to Europeans at the time. Marco Polo was not the only one to travel the Silk Road. Many other merchants and adventurers made the journey, but few left detailed accounts. One of the reasons for this is that literacy was not as common back then. Even Marco Polo, who was literate in several languages, did not write down his adventures himself. Instead, he dictated his stories to Rustichello, who added his own flair to the narrative. This was a common practice in the medieval period, where many books were written, as told to someone else. The book was written in French, which was a common language among the laity in Western Europe at the time. It quickly gained popularity, and was translated into many European languages. The book was so influential that it inspired other travelers and adventurers to explore the world. It also provided Europeans with a wealth of information about Asia, which was previously unknown to them. But the age of overland travel was not to last. By the mid-14th century, the Mongol Empire, which had kept the Silk Road safe and open, began to disintegrate. The Mongols, who had conquered vast territories on horseback, found it difficult to govern such a large empire. They faced internal conflicts, rebellions, and natural disasters like famine and floods. The last Mongol emperor, Tughan Temur Khan, was a decadent ruler who spent more time indulging in pleasures than governing. He fled the capital, Peking, when the Chinese rebels, led by Hongwu, rose up against the Mongols. This marked the end of Mongol rule in China and the beginning of the Ming dynasty. With the fall of the Mongol Empire, the overland routes to the east became dangerous and impassable. The new Chinese rulers, wary of foreign influence, closed their borders to Europeans. This meant that the flow of information and goods between Europe and Asia was severely disrupted. Europeans had to find new ways to reach the east. This is where the story takes a fascinating turn. The closure of the land routes pushed Europeans to explore the sea. They began to develop new technologies and methods for navigation. One of the most important figures in this period was the Italian cartographer Ptolemy. His work, Geography, which was rediscovered in the 15th century, provided Europeans with a detailed map of the world. This map, though not entirely accurate, gave them a starting point for their maritime adventures. The Portuguese, in particular, were at the forefront of these explorations. They began to sail down the coast of Africa, looking for a sea route to India and beyond. One of the most famous Portuguese explorers was Vasco da Gama, who in 1498 successfully reached India by sea. This was a historic moment, as it opened up a new trade route that bypassed the overland Silk Road. The discovery of sea routes to the east had a profound impact on the world. It led to the Age of Exploration, a period of intense maritime exploration and colonization. Europeans began to establish trade routes with Asia, Africa, and the Americas. This not only increased their wealth, but also expanded their knowledge of the world. One of the most significant outcomes of these explorations was the discovery of the New World. Christopher Columbus, an Italian explorer sponsored by the Spanish monarchy, set sail in 1492 to find a western route to Asia. Instead, he landed in the Americas, a continent previously unknown to Europeans. This discovery led to the colonization of the Americas and the establishment of new trade routes. The Age of Exploration also had a dark side. The colonization of new lands often involved the exploitation and subjugation of indigenous peoples. The spread of European diseases to these new lands caused massive loss of life. The transatlantic slave trade, which brought millions of Africans to the Americas, was a cruel and inhumane practice that had long-lasting effects on the world. Despite these negative aspects, the Age of Exploration had a profound impact on global history. It led to the exchange of goods, ideas, and cultures between different parts of the world. The European discovery of the New World and the establishment of trade routes to Asia and Africa changed the course of human history. It marked the beginning of a new era of globalization, where the world became more interconnected than ever before. In conclusion, the story of Marco Polo and the closure of the Silk Road is a fascinating tale of exploration, discovery, and change. It shows how the blocking of one path can lead to the opening of another. The Age of Exploration, which followed the closure of the overland routes, was a period of great innovation and adventure. It reshaped the world and laid the foundation for the modern era. Today, we continue to explore and discover new frontiers, both in the physical world and in the realm of knowledge. The spirit of exploration that drove Marco Polo and the explorers of the Age of Exploration lives on, inspiring us to push the boundaries of what is possible.